Okay, in this next video what we will do is retrieve the processed results. Just to recap, we created a project and set it up for data collection, did a simulation of entering 6 trees, and then sent that to the server for processing. The server takes about maybe an hour or so to process the data, and then what that does is it returns a results file and posts that on the server. So you have to be able to communicate with the server through the Eco application. You will receive an email that looks something like this, and it tells you that your data has been processed, and you can go ahead and download it. And it's basically just a zip file that populates the reports. And so you just, I'm going to go and do this through the Eco interface. So under the reports, you can see that you can't really access anything. Everything's grayed out. So not until we actually grab the results will we then be able to kind of see some information in the reports. So I'm going to just go ahead and hit OK, and it'll go through a retrieval process, which will take a few seconds here. Alright, our results have been downloaded, and you can see that the menu up top has changed too, and so now we can actually go see what are the options that we have available. So there are report options to explore here. I'm not going to go through all of these. You can spend a lot of time on these, and then also the manual discusses a lot of these reports in more detail. Since this was just a very small simulation of newly planted trees, you're not going to see a lot of benefits in these. So we'll just kind of pop this open, and so this isn't going to be all too exciting. You're going to see a lot of zero values because of the units that are being represented here. This is kind of set up more a little bit for larger scale projects. But what I would encourage you to do for like a tree planting type project is to go into the individual level summaries, which will at least kind of use smaller units and give you some of the information you can see. So for carbon storage, sequestration, our stormwater, what we call avoided runoff. Carbon avoided has to do with energy effects, and that's why you see the not available here. And then pollution removal. And again, these are for small stature 1-inch trees, so you're just not going to see a lot of the ecosystem services. So you have a lot of information underneath the benefits, so you can look at specific reports, things like hydrology effects, and even going beyond the avoided runoff, where you can see processes like evaporation, transpiration, and water interception. So there's a lot of detail involved in some of these reports. And so you've got benefit summaries that you can see, volatile organic compounds. So many of these are described in more detail in the manual. And there's things that are new reports like UV effects that you can look at. And then also one of the features that's nice about this too, and here again we're not going to see a whole lot of bang for our buck with this, but public health reports, and particularly if you capture larger trees or larger populations, where you start to see this is what ECO uses to assign monetary values based off the EPA's environmental benefit map, or BENMAP analysis program, which looks at the incidence of health reduction related to pollution removal for some of these types of health challenges. So basically things like asthma exacerbation, emergency room visits, lost time at work, lost school days. So you don't see anything here just because these trees are small, but this is one of the things where you have to create a story with potential. And I'm not going to go into this, but there is also a forecast module where you can project benefits into the future, and you'll be able to see some pollution and carbon increases over time. So this allows you to do a lot of different modules, and there's also a manual on that that describes the forecast module. So many different options available once you have those results available. One of the other things that's nice too is like once you have the population built up of all the trees for a project. There's also a canned written report available. This is just basically kind of like about maybe a 30-some page summary, a number of the different ecosystem services, but it also does structural analysis, and it creates somewhat of a narrative for a project. So this is just a nice way of looking at the data too, in somewhat of a summary, a canned summary report, and it talks about a lot of the just the data, but provides some background information. One of the other things that's very nice about this too is that it will also it has a nice small method section which describes kind of like what the model is actually doing in the background. So this is kind of one of the places that you could go to that could give you a little bit more background information and somewhat of a narrative for each one of these reports. So this is one of the more popular reports that's available within the iTree Eco application. And so for one tree, this will generate as it will for 10,000 or 60,000 trees. One of the other things that we did here too is that we stratified our results. So you could actually see things like we looked at benefits by species, but you could see also the differences if we wanted to look at the differences between the trees that were planted on the high school as opposed to those in the park. So this is kind of where you get the benefit of looking at data when it's stratified. There are also per unit estimates where you can look at, say, the difference of per unit area, carbon storage. We're just not going to see a whole lot with any of these right now, but this also will kind of help you see the differences per unit area of per acre. So this gives you an idea of looking at differences in density related to density. So it's another way of looking at data for especially for larger scale projects that can help you kind of work with results and compare the results between, say, different units or different properties too. So a number of different ways that you can work with this data. One of the other features with these reports too is that you can export these out, or you can actually even map these too if you have the GPS coordinates, especially with the individual level results. So right now I have the benefit summary displayed here, but you can if you notice, we don't see the GPS coordinates, so we have to go over to the right on the menu and toggle on the GPS coordinates. And now you can see those. It adds an extra page, and if we wanted to see what that looks like, we could say map active report, and this will just give us an idea of what that data looks like in a map. It's generating on my other screen, and I'll pull it over here. Eco doesn't have any type of robust or internal mapping kind of other than what you see here. It's very limited. This is just kind of a quick snapshot to show you where some of those trees are. And if you recall, we put some around Rowan Park or the parking lot, and then some on the other side of the park. You do have some option to change the display so we can see where we actually have those. And then you can click on these trees too if you want to see the actual data from that particular report. So this is kind of one of those nice features of just kind of giving an idea of like the mapping potential. If you wanted to actually map it externally or in an application like Google Earth, what you could also do is export that out as a KML too. So you can save it out as a KML file, and we will just call it for mapping. So if we go back to that folder where we exported that KML file out, we can double click on that, and that should open up Google Earth and give us an idea of what this looks like externally. Give that a minute. So we can see our trees there, and then we can zoom in. And same thing, we should be able to click on those trees and see some of the information related to that. So just a really nice way to go from simple eco data collection to trying to create something that can be shared to show some of the work that is being done with the school or with the constituents in the neighborhood, or some of the other decision makers, and also the residents too. So these are great tools when you can start mapping your data to share information and then making that public, especially to platforms like Google. And you can use Google My Maps too for a very similar process of exporting out a spreadsheet from iTreeEco, where we would just save this out. Let's try that again. I had a file open with the same name. So now we have our data with the coordinates. With these coordinates, this file would require a little bit more of manipulation. You can't take this straight away and import this into a GIS or Google My Maps. You have to do a bit of data cleaning just to kind of get it set up so it's ready for import, but you have pretty much of the framework to do that, as opposed to the KML file. That's somewhat of a seamless process just to kind of go from the data to looking at it in a map interface. Okay, well with that I think will be kind of the final piece of this series. Hopefully that gives you an idea of cradle to grave processing, from conceptual idea of using eco for a project like this. As you can tell, there are a lot of moving pieces to this, but it can be done if you want to, and there's many benefits of being able to master some of these processes to look at mature trees and beyond. All right. Good luck.